Hello everyone, welcome back to this video. In this video, I'm going to talk about a very important SAP CPI node function, which is removeContexts. In SAP CPI, especially when you're working with XML payloads, message mappings often deal with multiple contexts, which means when you're receiving an inbound message in XML format, it can have multiple contexts in the given XML. So you use this removeContext function to remove the context levels between the nodes and keep all the nodes in one context. The main purpose of removeContext is it removes all the context changes and brings all the values from the inbound XML to the same level, which means it is bringing all the nodes into one context. So why it is useful? By using removeContext function, you can flatten the structure, which means you make the data more linear. And when you want to use one as many function, you can use removeContext function as a prerequisite. Let's look at a simple example. For example, you have an input XML that has three different items, item A, B, and C, which belongs to three different contexts, context 1, context 2, and context 3. So when you use removeContext function, what happens is the items A, B, C will come under one context because removeContext removes all the contexts and keeps all the nodes under one context. So we learned that removeContext can be used to flatten the structure or bring all the nodes under one context. So let's look at what are the use cases that you can use the removeContext for. For example, you can use removeContext function when you want to join values from multiple nodes into a single field, or you can also use for concatenating multiple repeating values, for example, item names and IDs. Sometimes using join function, count, or exist function can be complicated, but we can simplify by using removeContext function. For example, if you want to process values in a single loop or merged into a single output node, in such cases, you can use removeContext function. Let's talk about the use cases where you should not use removeContext function. When you're doing one-to-one mapping from a nested repeating nodes, you should never use removeContext. Another thing is, if you want to maintain the hierarchy of the input structure, you should not use removeContext because removeContext actually removes the context. It can mess up the order of the incoming structure. The third aspect is, if you plan to use one as many function based on the context separation, because this function ideally depends on the incoming context. If you use the removeContext, it actually removes the context, so the output structure can be really messy. Another use case is if the data is logically grouped and the flattening would mix unrelated records. For example, you're getting a incoming structure based on some specific logical grouping. If you use removeContext, it can actually remove all the context and it can create the messiest output structure. So these are the cases where you should not use removeContext function. Let's quickly look at a short demo how you can use removeContext function in graphical mapping. Okay, this is sample implementation I've done to demonstrate the removeContext function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate by using a simple input XML. So let me click the sample input XML. As you can see here in the source structure, we have multiple employees. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 employees in the input structure. So let me close this one here. So I'm going to do a display queue function. I'm going to show you what are the input and output of this function here. Okay, so these are the incoming messages, incoming nodes we have. And let me repeat the same thing for removeContext node function. So this is the queue for this function. And let me show you the values that are going into the department target node. So these are the values which are going to the target node, right? Yes. Now, so as you can see here, so we have multiple values under different contexts. So we have HR, finance, and IT. So these are the incoming multiple context function and they are separated by a multiple context. The gray indicates a separation of the context. And as you can see here, the output of the removeContext function, all the values HR, finance, IT, they became under the single context. So this is how the removeContexts function uses to remove the context and flatten the data structure. Okay, this is very simple. I just want to demo how the function works and what would be the input and output. So this is how it looks in the real time.